Well, hey, everybody, it's Outland. How's it going? And I have a very special guest tonight. I'm super excited to have this person on because hopefully he's going to teach me a lot of stuff that I know nothing about. And so I'm super excited about that. But let's just get right into the interview here. Please welcome Fletch from All Things Overlanding.
Hey, thanks for having me, Lance. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. This is awesome.
Sure. Yeah. Super excited.
So I've been following you for a while and trying to learn some stuff because I am very green when it comes to overlanding. So just talk to me like I'm an idiot, just because I am.
Yeah. Do you just want to know like the definition of overlanding, I guess, to start?
Sure. Let's do that.
Okay. Yeah. So and now I have to remember that. Now that I threw myself under the bus there, now I have to remember what it is. I mean, there's the biggest one, I think, that if you Google it, that you'll see that is essentially along the lines of it's self-reliant travel where the journey is more important than the destination. It's usually vehicular in nature, so it's going to involve some sort of a vehicle. In my case, I've got an '05 Nissan Xterra that I drive. And you just try and be as self-sufficient as possible. But really, like, I guess the difference is the way that I kind of explain it to like my wife, for instance, when I started doing this was, you know how we go to Florida and it's a 14-hour trip and it's awful and you're dreading it and you're driving and it's boring. And then you get there and then you're all excited to be in Florida and you have your vacation and then you have a horrible 14-hour drive back. The difference is, yeah, you may be going to a place like, the Ozark National Forest or something like that. But really the journey is like just hanging out, convoying with other people, seeing things, stopping for no reason on the side of the road to take a picture of your truck, for example, or a beautiful site or something like that. Like that's as enjoyable as where you're going. So the journey is really the fun part, if that makes sense.
So I think a lot of people get the term confused with, they just think of it as car camping, which it is. That's not really it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like on all these like online forums and Facebook groups and everything, there's just been this giant debate recently about what is real overlanding. And, I mean, even myself, despite having a YouTube channel and like doing stuff and saying that I'm an overlander, like I think 90% of my trips probably are just camping trips. Like I will drive a couple hours away to a forest and I'll go camping for a night and then I'll come home, right? I'm not relying on my vehicle necessarily. The fact that I've set it up to be able to go on longer distance cruises where I can be reliable on it makes it more convenient for camping. But I really try not to get into, I kind of try and avoid the whole like naming it thing. I think as long as you're going out and exploring and, using your vehicle to do so and modifying it and trying to make it more useful for that task, like that's all that really matters, whether it's a Prius or a Land Cruiser, it doesn't really matter as long as you're trying, right?
Right. Yeah. So I have a Jeep Renegade. So I have this little tiny SUV, but I get a lot of flack about my little Renegade, but it is 4x4 and it gets me places, and I've taken it on some pretty rough locations and it's done fine. So it's kind of become my little overlanding vehicle, I guess you want to call it that, because it gets me some places that I normally would not ever be able to get to in another car. So
that's awesome.
So how did you get into overlanding?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I didn't really know. So here's how I got into it. So I guess I had years and years ago, I had a Jeep Cherokee XJ, just the wagony sort of Cherokee. And I off-roaded that. I never had any interest in like camping out of it really. I mean, I would use it and go to like a state park and camp, but it wasn't outfitted at all. It was just, I would throw my stuff in it and then go to the place. And I enjoyed that. I liked off-road driving, but my kind of background had been more in like sports cars and like autocrossing and that sort of stuff. I've always been like a car person. Right. So when I had been through a bunch of Nissans and Infinities and stuff, and then I made the horrible mistake, and there's nothing wrong with the car, don't get me wrong, but I leased a 2013 Honda Accord Sport, which has a CVT and a 4-cylinder. It was not a fun car. So I had that for 3 years, but I just was like, this is responsible. I was driving a long way to work. I was like, I need good gas mileage. And at the end of that 3 years, I was like, what have I done with the last 3 years? Like, this has been the worst. It's not fast. It's not fun. And I was like, you know what? Okay. I want 2 cars because I like the sport car sort of side of things. And I like the off-roading sort of side of things. After I got into that with the Jeep, I really enjoyed it. And like, you can have a whole day of off-roading for $20 as an off-road park. Whereas autocrossing, it's like a lot of work. There's heats and you only get to drive so much. So I really enjoyed the off-roading part. So I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? I need to find something that's pretty cheap. I need to find something that is a Nissan because I'm a Nissan person. That's the Xterra. That's literally all that I've got, or maybe a Frontier if I wanted a truck. And then I started watching YouTube videos about modifying Xterras. And as I started to watch those, I came across like a Rogue Overland where they overland in Xterras. And I started learning about overlanding, and I'm like, this is literally like off-roading, but not as macho and dumb, you know, like not just trying to smash stuff into rocks or be the coolest guy to climb a rock hill or whatever. But it combines camping, which I really like. It combines modification of vehicles, which I really like. And it combines off-roading and exploring. So that's kind of how I literally found it on YouTube and decided like, man, this is how I want to do my truck. Like I'm going to outfit my truck to do this thing. And that was about 4 years ago. And then just since then, I'm still obsessed with it. I still watch videos every day.
That's awesome. Yeah. I remember back in the day, this was several years ago, but my sister-in-law had a Xterra and I thought it was awesome. Like, I was like,
they're quirky trucks.
Yeah. And then like, after like, I'd been dating my wife for a while at that point, and then she got rid of it. I was like, damn, why'd you get rid of that Xterra? That thing was awesome.
They're really, it's funny because part of why I got it, so I am a Nissan person and I'm hugely biased and I'll admit that. But the other part of it was, you know, you watch these videos online and they're all Jeeps or Toyotas. That's all that anybody ever talks about. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, one, I like Nissan, and two, I could sort of represent an overlanding, if you will, for Nissan, and they're cheap. Like, I mean, that was the other part of it. When I started looking, I was like, looking at 99 2000 4Runners with 150, 180, 200,000 miles on them. And they wanted 10 to 12 grand for those things 4 years ago. And I was just like, okay, I mean, like that's within my budget, but that seems crazy to buy a vehicle with almost 200,000 miles that's 21 years old to go on long distance trips. Cause I mean, even though they're great trucks, like it still scares me a little bit to have that kind of mileage. And so then I started looking at Xterras again, and I found mine. I actually bought a private party off of a gentleman, 30 minutes away from me. It had been his daughter's truck, and it had 94,000 miles. It was bone stock, and I paid $7,000 for it.
Oh man,
4 years ago. So like, it was just everything aligned, and it worked out.
So you don't daily drive it? It's strictly for.
So I did for a long, long time. I bought a second car 2 years ago now. So for the first 2 years, I daily drove it. And then I still, because of the rooftop tent, it does not fit in my garage anymore. Okay. So it's blocking my car. So I still drive it more than I do my other car, especially in the winter. Yeah. So, and it's great. It's fun. It's funny because they're so different, right? Like there's my other car is like sort of a lowered Infinity. And then this is like a lifted Xterra. So it's like either time when I get in the car, then I'm like, man, this is so fun and different from the Xterra. And then I drive that for a couple of days and I'm like, I want to drive the Xterra again. I want to be big and tall and run over things. So,
so what kind of modifications have you made to your truck?
I'm going to try and keep it very brief.
Apparently a lot.
I could go for a long time. A lot of them are questionable in their sanity and usefulness, but I mean, the main things are, so of course it's lifted. I've got a 2.5-inch lift of mixed components. I mean, I've been lucky enough to find some pretty good deals on used stuff. So again, since it was an old truck, I'm like, if I can find some coilovers for half price from a buddy of mine that just got rid of his Xterra is what I did. I got them for about half of what they would have cost new with 15,000 miles on it. Oh. So like I've got 2.5-inch lift on it, 33-inch tires, buys me a little bit more clearance. Mixed armor underneath the truck. So again, just for protection's sake, if you do hit a harder trail, you don't want to get stuck out in the middle of nowhere. So I've got 3/16-inch steel armor all the way across the bottom of it. Aftermarket steel hidden winch bumper with a Smitty built 9500 in the front, LED headlights, LED fog lights, a custom built, I modified my stock roof rack and built a DIY Unistrut roof rack over top of that, which holds my rooftop tent and my awning and my Wii Boost, so a cell signal booster. I've got a drawer system in the back that a really talented woodworker friend of mine helped me build. That's pretty awesome, and I use it all the time. And it has a big slider on that comes out with fridge on top of it, and then it has a stove inside of it that comes out of the side of it. I've got an air compressor Vier 88P mounted in the back next to the drawer system to the side over there with an extended hose so I can air up around the truck. What else? I think that's the main thing. I've got a gas tank, a jerry can mount on the rear, hatch.
No Dometic fridge?
No, I'm too cheap for that.
It seems like something everybody has.
I know. Well, and they're great fridges. Like, don't get me wrong, but I bought an Alpacool 58 quart because I wanted a big one so that if I went on a 4 or 5 day trip, I didn't have to worry about it. But it was about $300.
Yeah.
And I've had it for about 8 months now, and it still just runs perfectly. Like, I use it every trip, and I think it'll go at least 3 or 4 or 5 years. And I mean, for that price, you could buy 2 or 3 Dometics. I mean, the cheapest, smaller ones, you know? So,
yeah.
So yeah, I have a cheap fridge. I have a Coleman grill. Like, I'm slowly upgrading everything, but in order to get more stuff up front, I buy cheap stuff. And then later I learned my lesson that that's not always the best option. And I buy nicer stuff to replace it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sometimes it's whatever works to start.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of places do you like to go? Where do you go on your trips?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do like, because of the Xterra is fairly capable, and with the big tires and lift and stuff, it is able to do a lot of stuff. I like to go to more challenging trails than just gravel stuff. So like, I'm trying to think of all the trips I've taken. So a few years ago, I went to the Trans-Wisconsin Adventure Trail. That was not terribly technical or challenging, but it was a lot of fun. Spent about 3 days up there and explored and had a really good time. I went to West Virginia a couple of years ago, and there were definitely some sections that we found in West Virginia that were pretty challenging, where I was kind of like, I don't know if I can make that. And then like a full-size power wagon did it, and I'm like, well, now I have to do it. Like, if the full-size truck can do it, I have to do it. So West Virginia was fun. The UP of Michigan, I love going to the UP. Nice. There's some great stuff up there. And then most recently, I was over in Missouri. I really want to hit the Ozarks, but I was there for that More Expo. So it was an expo, I didn't get to hit any trails. It was a weekend thing. But I will definitely, hopefully this year, be going back to the Ozarks and checking that out, because I think that's about my jam. Like, water crossings, tough stuff, but nothing too crazy that's going to destroy your truck. But like, there's some challenges. So
yeah, I was just in. Hold on a second. Oh, out of focus. What's up with that? That's better.
Yep.
Okay. I was in January. I was in Land Between the Lakes down in Kentucky. Have you ever been down there?
No, I have friends that have. I haven't made it yet.
So I guess people do a lot of overlanding because there's all these forest roads that go all through the whole area. Mm-hmm. And so I was down there in my little Jeep Renegade, and what I didn't know that there's a rating system on difficulty, like from 1 to 5 on the roads. So, I'm just looking at the map. I'm like, oh, this is a shorter road to get me to the trailhead, because I was going backpacking. And it's like, it's a 300 level road. It was 300 something. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I had no idea that was the more difficult level road. So I start going down this road. I'm crossing through creeks. I'm like, oh my gosh. But that Jeep did awesome. It did fantastic, but it was fun. Like, okay, driving through creeks, this is pretty cool. Yeah. Like, it's only like 4 inches of water, but it was fun. And I'm like, I could do this. I could do this regularly. This is a good time.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is I think people underestimate their vehicles. Like, I've done it with mine a million times, where, when I was in the UP last September, we hit this really, I wouldn't call it really tough, but it definitely has some rocky sections, and it goes up. It's called the Cliff Mine Trail up in the UP, but you go up this really sort of rocky, like hill, mountain essentially. And I hit this one point, and I was using my armor, and I was rubbing on stuff and doing stuff. But the whole time I was like, oh my God, like, I can't go back. I have to follow these guys. One guy was in a Wrangler with like 35s, and then another guy was in a Land Cruiser. And then there's little old me in my Xterra, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this, but we made it up. It did fine. It did great. I tapped his slider a time or two, and that was fine. But yeah, you can do more than you think. You can do a lot more than you think with these vehicles.
Yeah. You're talking about West Virginia. I went down there last summer, and I got lost in some backcountry roads around Spruce Knob. That's where I was. And I don't know where I ended up. I mean, but these were supposedly just normal roads, like what people drive to their house. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get out of here. It scared me.
Did you have reception when you were in West Virginia?
No.
Like cell phone? Me neither. Terrifying.
Yeah, no reception. I was in the middle of nowhere. I didn't save down my maps. Big mistake. So I didn't have offline maps. The GPS had no idea where I was. So I was like, am I going north? I was trying to go northwest, And I was like, am I going north, south, east? I have no idea where I'm going. I'm like, I ended up taking an hour to get out of that area. Just
Wow.
nothing but tiny little farmhouses and pigs and goats. And I'm like, what in the world have I done?
Yep. Yeah, we hit, and I have Verizon, and I think the other guys I was with had like Sprint or something, which I've never heard of Sprint being better than Verizon. But in West Virginia, like they still had reception. And I told them, I was like, if you lose me, if I get lost, like I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna have to stop at someone's house and like ask for directions.
Yeah.
So don't lose me. And I just stayed on their tail the whole trip for four or 5 days.
Yeah, I have Verizon too, and I had nothing for most of the trip.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that kind of segues me into the next question. So, talking about people who want to do this kind of thing, what kind of gear do you think is essential? What kind of things do people have to have if they're going to do stuff like this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, I would start by saying, obviously the more gear that you have, the better off you're going to be, right? In order to get started, though, I generally tell people you don't need a whole lot, right? Like, it's not like you need to. There are a lot of people that have what I call analysis paralysis, where they will sit for 6 months, a year, 2 years and build their rig up and build and save money and buy all this stuff and a winch and a bumper. And you don't have to have all that stuff. Like we were just talking about with the vehicles being really capable, sort of stock even. They really are. As far as like a minimum goes, I think I did an episode on this a while ago, and I talked about it sort of like those survival shows that you would watch, right? Like shelter, food, so something, a cooler. It doesn't have to be a refrigerator or anything fancy like that on a slider. It could just be a small cooler or something, but you have to have food, you have to have shelter, you have to have a way to start fire. You don't have to, but for comfort and the sake of going, like, why are you going you're not going just to survive, right? You're going to have a good time. Right. Those are kind of the basics, but any vehicle, preferably with 4x4, doesn't have to be 4x4, but if you're going to hit challenging stuff, 4x4 is better. Recovery gear is one of those things that's an essential. First aid stuff is an essential. And that's, recovery and first aid, those are the real things that you have to have. But then you could have a $50 Coleman tent. You could have a $20 sleeping bag. Like you do not have to have millions of dollars worth of gear to do this stuff. So
yeah. Because I look on Instagram and I see all these posts and I'm like, oh my goodness, they have like the recovery boards, and I priced those out. I'm like, oh my gosh, the max, what do they call the max
tracks?
Max tracks, yeah,
like $400 or something.
Yeah, for a pair of those. They've got all this stuff that it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, and I can tell you, in 4 years of doing this now. So I just got my winch like a year and a half or two ago. That was after West Virginia. I didn't even have it when we went to West Virginia. I've used my winch one time in the last 4 years. And it was because of something I knew I was going to get stuck in. It was in Hoosier National Forest, which has no challenging trails, but there was this one entrance into a campsite that was really rutted out. And I kind of got out and I looked at it and I was like, I've been through here before, but that looks deeper. And I think I'm going to get stuck, but I have a winch, so I'll try it. And I went down and I high centered immediately and was stuck right away. But there was a bypass too. So like if I'd really been overlanding and like thinking, if I hadn't just been joking around and being like, well, if I get stuck, I'll just use the winch, I could have easily bypassed that thing. And so, again, even on all the challenging trails and stuff, you're with other people. Somebody else will have a winch. Someone else will have, I guess that would be a good starting thing too, is don't ever go alone when you're new, right? Like don't go out that really tough trail that you hit where it was like, all it takes is one mud hole that you're like, that doesn't look that deep. And then you're stuck, miles from anywhere.
Yeah.
So just take minimal gear, learn your stuff. And then you'll learn like really quickly. Every trip I go on, I feel like I come home and I have an Amazon shopping list. Like, I'm like, what I need to improve is this, or what sucked was that. How can I fix that? So that's half the fun of it.
You said you've always been into vehicles. So are you really mechanically inclined? Like if it breaks down, can you like open the hood and be like, do fixed? Or because I am not.
Yes and no. I wouldn't say that I'm super mechanically inclined, but I have. So when I was doing autocross stuff, like I had a lower 350Z because I'm a Nissan guy, right? And like I took that into the dealership one time for like warranty repair on my window stopped working, my window motor. And it was the worst. Like it scraped going into the dealership service center. The guys, you could just see them drooling, looking at the car to like go rag on it. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm going to wait for it. I'm just going to stay here. I'm going to wait. And then when they put it back together, they did it all wrong and all this stuff. So like, it's really out of necessity, where I was just like, you know what? I don't trust other people, especially with modified vehicles, to like treat them right and to take care of you and do a good job. So like, but at the same time, I'm not, you know, tearing apart engines and rebuilding engines or anything. I'm doing maintenance stuff, brake jobs, pretty much anything though that you can watch on YouTube. I mean, I can do most of it. I've done wheel hubs. I did a flywheel in my 350Z in my garage, on jack stands. Like that's, I didn't have a lift or anything, just jack stands and a, you know, little hydraulic lift.
Oh yeah.
And so I mean, I'm fairly inclined, but if anything ever exploded on the trail, I'd be in trouble. But if it's like brakes or something, I could do that. I could do simple stuff, simple diagnosis.
Yeah, I did my first mod, whatever you want to call it. I put ditch lights on my little Jeep.
Nice.
Yeah, and that was the first time I'd ever done anything electrical on a vehicle at all. And I'm like, I'm gonna fry the electrical system. I'm gonna do something really so I watched like 20 different YouTube videos, and I'm like, okay, this is how they're all doing it. All right, I think I'm doing it right, and they work great.
Yeah.
I haven't set my car on fire yet, so.
Well, that's good. Yeah, you learn a lot. The more you do it, the more you learn. It's like brake jobs. Like I've probably now at this point, between all my cars that I've had, and then I had buddies for a while at work that like would come in and be like, oh, it's gonna be $600 at Meineke to get my brakes done. And I'm like, just give me a case of beer and you come over. You have to help. I'm not just gonna do it, but you come over and we'll spend an hour or two and I'll show you how to do it.
Yeah.
So I've probably done 20, 25 brake jobs at this point. So I'm pretty good at brakes. But yeah, oil changes, brakes, that kind of stuff, easy. Spark plugs, not so bad, but engine explodes, I'm done.
I always used to be so scared of that kind of stuff, but you know, it really does pay to know how to do it.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
definitely.
All right, so let's transition here a little bit. Tell me how you got into YouTube.
Oh, yeah, good question. So I think I technically started my channel like 4 years ago, and it was honestly because I was obsessed with it, because I had watched so many people doing overlanding and doing YouTube videos. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to go on epic trips. I'm going to get the drone. I'm going to get all this stuff, and I'm going to learn. I'm going to get a DSLR, and I'm going to teach myself how to be a professional YouTuber. And then for like 2.5 years or so, I was like, oh God, I'm not going to be on camera. Like I'm just going to get destroyed on the internet because I'm a goober, and you know, like they're just going to hate me. They're going to destroy me. And so like, I think in the first like 2.5 years, I made like 10 or 12 videos, and they were all the worst, like overbearing music and just like terrible introductions and intros and outros, and like not me at all, but like me holding a phone, trying to drive my truck up a rock wall in a, you know, an off-road park, that kind of stuff. It is so bad. And then finally I was like, you know what though is the interesting thing about these YouTube channels is there's always a person, right? Like you get to know a person, you get to know their personality, and then you can associate with that person and say, oh, okay, like in my case, I'm a dude from Indiana that started doing this a few years ago, and I'm cheap. I don't like to spend a lot of money. So like a lot of people that I've talked to since starting it and being on camera have said like, oh, you're like a normal person. You're not like these fake YouTubers that are like, you know, sponsored out the butt and like just do all kinds of sponsored huge things and lie about everything. Like you'll tell us the truth if something sucks or is good or bad or whatever. And so that's kind of how it grew then from there. So about 1.5 years ago, I really started to take it seriously. And I was at 80 subscribers, I think 1.5 years ago, after like 2.5 years of having a YouTube channel. And then now I'm over 4,000, I think, just over 4,000 recently. So like it's, I don't know why people like me. I don't know if they do. Maybe they're just full of crap, but thank you everyone that pretends to like me, I guess. Makes me feel good.
No, that's awesome, man. You've surpassed me actually. And I've been doing this for 6 years. So
yeah, no, I saw you have a good following. Yours is solid.
I've had the same problem though. Like my original videos, I never really took it seriously. And you can tell it's like they were so poor quality, filmed with a phone or something. Like the audio was terrible, the video was terrible. I'm like, well, no wonder nobody wanted to watch these videos. You know, it's like, so just the past couple of years, I've really tried to step it up and get a good camera and mics and all that junk. But man, it's expensive. And you know, the payback isn't, you know, you don't do this to make money. right. Unless you do it full time. I'd really just do it for fun. I enjoy making videos, and I like helping people out and meeting people
Yeah.
like, like people like you. And I've made a bunch of other friends on YouTube through YouTube just because
Yeah.
of common interest. So that's why I love doing it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. YouTube is like a really weird social media platform. Like, and I mean that in the best possible way. Like, on Facebook, it's very internet-y, where you'll just get decimated. You can post one thing one day and people are like, "You're an idiot. That sucks. Why'd you do that?" And the next day you can post the same thing. They're like, "Oh, I love that. That's a great idea."
Right.
And
Yep.
it's like that on almost all of them. But on YouTube, like same thing as you, right? Like that's so like Grant Wilbanks of like Arkansas Off-Road. That dude has like 50,000 subscribers. He's huge. But like we kind of share common interests. He's been on my show a couple of times, and like I met him for the first time in person at More Expo, and like we're buddies, and Ozark Overland Adventures and Overland Pioneers and all these people that I follow on YouTube. Like you find out really quick who the approachable ones are, and if they'll talk to you, they're 99% of the time they're just normal folks like you, and they geek out about like talking about videos and B-roll and shooting stuff and trips they've taken and gear and all that stuff. And then like I actually have made multiple friends, just like you said, on YouTube, where like on Facebook and Instagram, I would never envision that happening in a million years. Yeah. So it's cool.
Yeah, I've noticed. I've talked to a lot of much bigger channels, and most of them are just like, I have no idea how I got this big. I don't. All of a sudden, I had 20,000 subs, and then it was 50, and I'm like, well, I wish that I had that problem. That problem.
That'd be nice. Yeah, I would definitely take that too, but not happening.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about the whole explosion of social media? YouTube is a fantastic thing, but and Instagram and all that stuff is great. Sure. But do you think maybe the term overlanding, I think we talked about that, the term overlanding, do you think it's social media is maybe hurting it a little bit? Just people going out there showing things that are dangerous that not everybody should be attempting, maybe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. There's a couple of points to be made there. I think one of them is, yes, the danger and like the lack of responsibility as far as like tread lightly goes, like these people doing crazy things that they definitely shouldn't be doing. And there's not a lot of education around that either. I feel like there should be more, right? And I by no means am saying that I'm any sort of expert. I'm sure I've done things that I shouldn't have done because I didn't know any better. But there's not a lot of intentionality, right? It's like whatever I have to do for views is what I want to do. I feel like with a lot of people, a lot of the times. And then I also feel like the other sort of thing that is hurting it is because the term overlanding was essentially fairly underutilized even 3 or 4 years ago. Like when I first found it, it was like Ronnie Dahl, 4-wheel drive action and like Expedition Overland. And maybe Overland Bound, but they weren't really making videos back then, So it was like, that was it. That was all you had. And now it's like myself, I started a YouTube channel. You've got a YouTube channel, like you're not necessarily all overlanding, right? But like, there's a million. I feel like I see like 5 or 6 new channels pop up a day posting, hey, here's my first video. And that's great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining. I think that's awesome. But as a result of that, then you've got all the people that don't have YouTube channels, right? The joke about how overlanders aren't really overlanders because all they care about is getting that perfect picture for the gram or, taking that trip to be able to shoot a video for their YouTube channel, And I think that has hurt it some where it's almost become stigmatized where like, if you say I'm into overlanding, I'm an overlander, they're like, oh, you mean car camping? They just instantly have a bad feeling about you. Right. So yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
I mean, that same thing happened with my genre, which is I'm a backpacker, hiker.
Yeah.
When I started doing this, there were a handful of channels, and it was, I was like, man, I can't find any channels of people who just go out and hike, and that's what I wanted to see. And now it's like I literally see 10 new channels a day of so and so backpacking and blah 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 hiking, and it's awesome, but it's like it's overwhelming too. It's like wow. And there's so many people going out there, trying to film themselves and do all these things. And it's like, okay, are we teaching all the right stuff? Are we, for the people who don't know what they're doing out there and are looking for information, because YouTube is a search engine, right?
Sure. Yep.
So are we teaching leave no trace? Are we teaching respect the environment, stuff like that? Because I'm big on that. I'm big on leave no trace.
Sure.
Because I go out in places in Kentucky. I go to the Red River Gorge a lot, and That place is just destroyed.
Yeah.
And they're talking about now, closing trails down, limiting campsites because people have just thrashed it. And it makes me sick because that was one of the places, because I live here in Ohio, and there's not a lot here in Ohio.
Right.
You gotta go a couple hours in some direction to get something cool. So that was one of my main places. It's a 2.5 hour drive to Red River Gorge from where I live. And I would always go there because it's like backcountry, wild, rugged. And now it's like, now they're going to start limiting. It's going to be like Ohio, where you have to book sites and designated places to camp that are, there's no firewood. There's nothing. The land's all stripped. That's how these trails are here. It's like everything's just dirt. The trails are, the campsites are just mud and dirt.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah. No, it's exactly the same in Overlanding. Like so the DNR guys patrol Hoosier National Forest pretty frequently, and I've run into them 3 or 4 times probably in the last few years, and they're always super nice, but they come up with their hand on their gun, that's their first approach.
Right.
They're walking towards you with that hand up, and you're just like, hey, howdy, hi, but now that I've gotten to know some of them, I talk to them and they're just like, they come up and they see that I've got a trash bag hung on the side of my truck, and it's full of like old like beer bottles with faded labels and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, because every time I get here, it's destroyed. It's like people just sit at a fire and they throw their beer cans out into the woods, or they burn metal wire in the fire. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I try and clean them up, because I know those DNR guys are going up there when nobody's there, and they're seeing that, and who's to say that when or what makes that decision to say, close this one down. Put up posts at the front of it and nobody can come back here anymore, So because
last fall I went down to Hoosier National Forest with that hiking guy. I don't know if you know Chris, the hiking guy. So he took me to a really cool campsite in Hoosier, and we got back there and there was all these pines and it was gorgeous. Nice. We get back there and there's like a old green and white Walmart tent. It's all like fallen over, smashed in. And then we're like, what happened here? Well, we were scared to look in it, to see what's going on. But we were like, okay, is there a body in here? And there were clothes and there were shoes. It's like they just left.
Yeah.
And so the DNR guy showed up later that night and started talking to us. And we're like, we found this tent. We're going to take it out. We're going to pack it out and throw it away. And he's like, oh yeah, I talked to those people last week, and he thought it was like squatters, like homeless people or something, who living out of their car. And they just left this tent and Skyline chili bags. I don't know, all kinds of garbage. And the other thing we found at that site were all these shell casings, shotgun shells.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, what happened? Was there like a war here?
Nope. Just shooting guns in the woods for no reason and not picking up after themselves.
And I was telling the DNR guy, I'm like, okay, there's all these shell casings all over. Should I be worried? He's like, oh no, I told those people to just make sure they cleaned up after themselves. So you let them just shoot into the woods? He's like, oh yeah, whatever. But I walked further back in that campsite, and they had been shooting at a tree, like trying to chop down a tree with a shotgun. I'm like, what is happening here? This is crazy.
Yeah, I'm not a huge gun person. I mean, I have a shotgun that I inherited that's like a single shot 20 gauge. It's super deadly. But I mean, I like guns. I have no problem with them. But like every time I go out there, my wife is always super nervous about it, because she's like, she'll be on the phone with me if I have reception, if I'm in a site that has a little bit of reception, and she'll just hear pop, 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 pop. And she's like, what is that? Is that gunfire? And I'm like, yeah, it's Hoosier National Forest. It's 9 o'clock. Everybody's drunk. They're shooting their guns, trying to chop trees in half. That's what they're doing. It's really weird.
It is very strange. Yeah. I thought that only happened in Ohio.
Nope. We are also victims of it over here.
But I'll tell you, Hoosier National Forest is absolutely gorgeous, man. There's some really cool places back there.
Yeah. I've been very careful. So when I first started going there, I was all excited about it. And I was like, what would be cool is, this was maybe the YouTube thing taking over a little bit too much, where I was like, what would be cool is if I did like a map and I mapped them all out. And I said, like, I did like a video review of each individual campsite and like talked about them. And I posted up like the first one of those and I had a site and I had the, here's the Google GPS in it. And then for like the next year, I could never get that site again.
Oh.
Like, and it's not me, like I'm not famous or anything, but like no one has content about Hoosier National Forest. So like if anybody searched like camping Hoosier National Forest, they found that video. And that's the one, like that's the one I just went last weekend. And that one happened to be open because it was going to get down in the 20s that night. So people, they're wusses. But that was when I go up there and there's like wire in the fire and bottles everywhere. And it's just like, man, okay. This is why I always thought, man, it's kind of a jerky move to not share your stuff with people. And then the more that I started to do it, the more I realized people can't be trusted, right? Like people are garbage for the most part. I'm sorry to say it, but unfortunately there are, a preponderance of people that are into this hobby that just watch it on YouTube and think I can do whatever I want. I'm going to go out there and get drunk and not be responsible. And so now I've kind of pulled way back on that. I have like 2 or 3 spots that are really easy to find, like right off the road that anybody could find. So if someone asks me for that, I'll give them because they're nicer than a lot of the spots, but they're not anything super special because I stopped giving those out.
I have a friend he's mapped out hundreds of waterfalls down in Kentucky. He's hiked off trail to find all these. He's like, please don't share these because I want to be a jerk, but I don't. And some of the places he said, a year ago, no one knew about. He's like, he didn't even sure if they were named. Now he goes back there and he's like, there was vegetation all around it. It's all dirt now and there's all these trails going all over. People found this place either through social media or who knows, word of mouth or whatever. And it's just people, it's like people just can't. Why can't you just respect it and stick to the trail or, stick to a little area and stay off the vegetation, but they just can't.
Yep. It's really unfortunate. That's the more people that I talk to. So I know, like I said, a few people through YouTube that do overlanding stuff, and they are always like, I will give you my maps, but if you share them, I'll kill you. Right. Like that's, there's like, so they'll share them with certain people that they trust that are, going to behave. But yeah, I mean it. And again, I used to think like, man, those guys are kind of like, why are they hoarding it? Like that looks beautiful. I want to go there. Right. But then I quickly realized, oh yeah, I get it. It makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, it totally makes sense. And well, I don't know if vehicles could do more damage to the backcountry than some people.
Could
but
be.
I guess they could. There's that whole genre of off-roaders, Jeep people. No offense, Jeep people, but the Wrangler people who like to make as much mud as they can.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing about overlanding too, is that's a little different. And I find that a really interesting dichotomy, like online, on like a Facebook group or something, is when people are like, they want that. Like, so when I say I enjoy challenging trails, I mean like a road, right? Or a trail that is established that has some challenging stuff in it, like water crossings or rocks or things like that. But there's a subset of people that started as rock crawlers and off-roaders, and like, they're that exact same way, right? Where they're like, oh, nobody's been up over there, let's go do that. And that's really, I mean, not to poo-poo on anybody, but obviously that's not really overlanding. That's, I'm going to go off-roading in a forest. Right.
And I like that kind of stuff. I mean, that's cool in designated areas, but not necessarily going off into your national forest somewhere and
making your own path through the woods.
Just I'm gonna knock these trees down.
Right. I got a chainsaw. I can get through here.
Oh man. So I guess what advice do you have for people who are looking to get into this hobby? Is that what I guess you'd call it?
Yeah, I'd call it a hobby. That's a great question. I would say from an advice standpoint, learn as much as you can. So like we've kind of been alluding to this whole time, it's easy to watch a really cinematic video with tons of, drone shots and all this like crazy stuff of a, convoy going across the desert or something or through Moab and get really excited about it and just rush out and not know. Like I will even use myself as an example. Like 4 years ago when I first got my truck, I'd never been dispersed camping. I'd been to state parks a million times and I've been hiking and stuff and parked a truck in the parking lot and then gone hiking on trails, right? But I'd never really been dispersed camping. So I'm like, what is allowed? Like, I literally went to like the Hoosier National Forest website and I'm like reading. I'm like, okay, what is all this stuff? But so like, as far as tips go, learn as much as you can, right? Like wherever you're going, learn about that place, ask people, so you're getting on a forum that is, like a Facebook group that's related to Hoosier National Forest, or there's like a Midwest Overlanders or Indiana Overlanders, where you can ask questions like that or search it and see questions that people have asked. Favoring safety and being cautious and treading lightly over going crazy. Like, I know everybody wants to go wheeling and they want to get those sweet shots of mud flinging up everywhere, but like, be as easy as you can, especially that first time, and start small with your gear and then learn as you go. Like, that's the biggest thing I learned was before I even got my truck, I had stuff ordered on Amazon coming in the mail ready to go.
Right.
And I thought I was being really smart, and I don't use any of that gear anymore. Like, it was all a mistake. So I probably wasted hundreds of dollars on stuff that sucked or that isn't good, and watch those YouTube videos, but be careful, right? Like, there are a million people that review XYZ flashlight. And so like, try and find a YouTuber or something, somebody that you kind of identify with and that you can counterbalance. You can see, okay, they reviewed this thing and they said it wasn't good, right? They're not just like sponsored out the wazoo and just telling you things are good because they're being paid to. Mm-hmm. And then you can kind of lean on them for knowledge so you don't waste that money. Like, I've done quite a few episodes that are like, hey, here's the top 10 things that literally changed my trips, or, here's what I wish I'd known when I started, or that kind of stuff. I focus a lot on newer overlanders, because I've only been doing it for a few years, so.
That's awesome. That's really good advice. Yeah. Cause I looked, when I was looking for a certain piece of gear, I really wanted a new cooler for doing these kind of trips. And I was like, man, everybody has a Yeti. Do I really want to spend that kind of money on a Yeti? And then I started doing all this research, and I stumbled upon Grizzly coolers, and I was like, oh, these are made in USA. They're just like these things are awesome. And so I ended up ordering one of those, and it is awesome.
Nice.
And so I was like, oh man, this is pretty, it's not a fridge, but it's going to hold stuff for about 4 or 5 days or longer. So it's pretty cool.
That is cool.
But since I'm a gear geek, I love geeking out or stuff like that. It's just exciting. What vendors, like gear manufacturers, do you recommend people look at? Like, I know of a couple.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So that's sort of the bad thing about that cheap side of me is I don't have any allegiances really. I will say, and I'll say up front, like, so I partner with Last US Bag. So like, the way that happened is he's actually Will, the guy that works at Last US Bag. He contacted me. He was the first interview I'd ever done. I'd never done an interview before. And he just said, hey, can I come on and talk about Last US Bags? And we did that, and it was just a fun chat and stuff. And then like a month later, I got a package in the mail and had like 3 bags in it. And I was like, oh my God, I like called him like, dude, you didn't have to do that. Like, I didn't expect that at all. But then I started checking those things out because I had some junk from Amazon, right? Like a $40 backpacking backpack that was like the seams were coming apart on and the zippers didn't work and stuff. And so then I started really considering, oh yeah, there are other manufacturers. Their stuff's all made in the US. It's really reasonably priced, but like they have stuff for overlanders. So that's when then later on, as my channel grew, like I reached out to him and I was like, hey, would you like partner with me and help me out to like put more content out? And so like I've gotten a couple of bags from them, which has been amazing, but they like, I will anytime, if anybody wants to see them in person, you see me, just come and grab me. But these things are actually really, really nice. Like Last US Bags makes really good, high quality stuff. I would put it on par with like the Blue Ridge Overland gear guys.
That's the one I was going to mention.
Everybody's heard of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're the big guys in the game, I feel like, but Last US Bag stuff it's all made in the US and it's great quality stuff. So I do like them a lot. I like, like I said, I don't have like my fridge is a Chinese fridge because it's like a third or a quarter of the price of the other one. So like when it comes to cheapness, sometimes I will do it. I did just recently pick up, and I'm not sponsored at all by these guys, but an Overland Vehicle Systems awning. And it was a big investment. Like it's about a $700 awning. Mm-hmm. But I had a $250, $300 Tough Stuff awning before, and it's been great. I haven't had any problems with it. But the deployment of it, it's just like you got to pull the tarp all out, and then you've got to wrestle back up under it and pull these arms out and pull them out and tighten them in and drop the legs. And it's like, you look like an idiot when you're putting this thing out. And it's just such a hassle. I hardly ever used it. So I scrimped and saved and waited for a long time, like 4 years to get this OVS awning, but man, it's like freestanding. It opens up. It's self-supporting. It comes with legs. If it's high wind or rain or something.
Nice.
But it takes 2 minutes to put this thing out, and it's twice as big as the old Tough stuff.
Wow.
So I'm a big fan of my OVS stuff. For solar, I like Renogy. Again, I'm not sponsored by them, but like just the reviews and everything. There are a million different Chinese manufacturers of solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
The Renogy stuff's a little more expensive, but not super expensive. And I've had that 100-watt panel strapped to the hood of my truck for 2 years, and it looks new. I mean, it works great.
Nice.
So those are a few of them. I mean, there's a million of them. Coleman, I mean, that's the old standard. It's cheap stuff. They're not going to last as long as like a Last US Bags bag or, something that's higher quality that costs more. But I had 2 Coleman pop-up tents, and they lasted me 3 or 4 years, between the 2 of them, and they were $50 a piece. My stove is a Coleman. I mean,
yeah, I got a Coleman stove. It's a nice stove. Yeah.
So you don't have to spend $1 million.
Yeah. And I've gone down that whole road of the whole rabbit hole of power banks, electronic generators. I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. So I got the cheapest base metal jackery, and I'm like, my last video, like I did a talk about it, and I'm like, hey, jackery, you want to send me a 1,000 one or 500? I'll take it.
Those are nice and pricey.
They are so expensive.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just can't justify that. I can't right now.
Yeah. It's, that's kind of why I buy the cheap stuff. Although I will say again, I mean, there are definitely certain things that I've learned over the years you can't really go cheap on, but there are some that you totally can. I mean, again, like a fridge. I mean, there are people spending $1,500, $2,000 on a fridge. And I'm like, I'm really into overlanding to the point where I have a YouTube channel, and I don't know if I'll be in it in 10, 12 years, as long as those things are going to last, like who knows?
Right.
So yeah, I try to, like, on my website, I have like a gear page that is literally the list of my gear, because it took me 4 years of like swapping out, to your point, like power banks, and just, I've had 5 different types of rechargeable electric hand warmers.
Oh, man.
Because I'm a winter camper. I like going in winter, and I like the chemical ones. I have those as a backup because they always work, but I like the electric ones because they're just rechargeable. They're replenishable. But I mean, I've had some that are really terrible, some that are okay, and then some that are really good. And so I've tried to like eliminate the really bad ones and get my better gear out there. So
yeah, definitely. And you got some merch of your own, don't you? For sale?
I very light merch. I have stickers and patches. Yes. Yeah,
those are really cool. I like your designs are awesome, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, really cool.
The sticker I did 4 years ago, like when I first started that channel, I bought 200 stickers.
Yep.
Before I'd ever made a video, before I did anything, I was like, this is going to be big.
I'm ready.
Yeah. And I bought 200 stickers from Sticker Mule, and I still have about 130 of them.
The Sticker Mule deals. That's how I got all my stickers. Like every time it's like 50 for $19 or whatever. I'm like, yep, nice. I'll order some more.
Yeah. And then the patches were more recent, but I actually did have like a graphic designer friend help me with those, and she did a great job. I love the new logo because it even incorporates the old one, so it still all works, but I just like it. And the patch company that I worked with did a great job. Like, I'm in love with the patches. They're high quality. They're super nice looking. I've gotten a lot of compliments on them, but I love the patches. Patches are really nice.
Yeah, those are.
I'll be ordering more of those.
I have to buy me one of those. Those are sweet.
No, you just send me your address. We can exchange.
Okay, cool.
I'll send you a patch and a sticker.
Sweet, man. So I guess last question, are you going to go to any, since 2021 is looking a little better than last year, are you going to you went to the More Expo, you said?
Yeah.
In the middle of the pandemic thingy, was that?
I was a little nervous about it. I was definitely nervous about it, but I have been vaccinated now, which is, we got super weirdly lucky with one of those, like, hey, we have extras. Can you get in here now? And we were like, we're on our way.
Awesome.
So the wife and I have been vaccinated, so that's a nice feeling. But I wasn't at the More Expo, but actually Chris Holloway, the gentleman that runs that, they've been kind of one of my partners for the last year too, just me trying to help get the word out about that, because they'd only done it once. It was the second year. So I like those small guys, right, that people haven't heard of, that are just good people trying to do cool stuff. Yeah. But I talked to him before, and I was like, this is going to be sketchy if you have a lot of people in here, but they were really, really good about enforcing. I was really impressed. And that's an honest take. And there were a lot of people that have been there that said the same thing. Like, everybody, I mean, I saw 2 or 3 people probably that were like belligerently not wearing masks and wandering through. I mean, you're going to have those, right? And it's like, am I going to approach this big guy and tell him to get out? No, I mean, you know, but I mean, they were really good about enforcing the rules, and I actually felt really good. I didn't, you know, from my knowledge, it's been like a month now, I guess, almost a month. And I haven't heard of anybody getting sick or anything. So I think they did everything they possibly could to keep it safe. So I felt better about that.
That's good.
Than I did going into it.
Yeah, because I really want to go to the Overland Expo East, which is in Virginia.
I'd love to go to
I think that's in October. I'm going to try to get down there to that, I think, maybe.
We'll have to see. I would like to do that. I'm going to Core for sure in September because I went to that last year. So that's in the UP.
Okay.
It's put on by Northology, who is another one of my partners. She just does like a magazine. She has a magazine, digital, like you would actually really like it. It has like hiking stuff, like kayak stuff, just all kinds of outdoor stuff, including overlanding. So it's just like a free digital magazine she puts out. But she is one of the people that runs the Core event. That's how I met her.
Okay.
And it's like a 4-day event with trail rides and a vendor village and like bonfires at night. And it's on the lake in the UP, like on Lake Superior. And it's just beautiful. Man. You can run around and do whatever you want, or you can grab get on the back of a convoy and go on a trail ride. That's awesome. It was literally one of the best events I've ever been to.
Wow.
So definitely doing that event.
Yeah. When is that?
It's sold out in one day.
Oh, really? So you can't even go if you wanted to.
So they have a wait list because, you know, inevitably people are going to drop. People that bought them are going to cancel. So they have a wait list for that. And then they give away some tickets. Like, I think they can push it a little bit. So like they do some giveaways and stuff like that too. But I bought it the morning, 7:00 in the morning, the day that they released. And by the end of the day, they were sold out.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. Sounds like fun though, man. Jeez.
It's really neat. Yeah, it's really neat. Awesome people. Fun to meet people.
Sweet. Well, man, we've been going for, I think, an hour here now. So I guess we'll wrap it up. I don't want to take any more of your time, but thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate this. This has been awesome. Guys, make sure you go check this guy out. Check out his channel. You have a really cool Instagram too, right? Is it named the same? All Things Overlanding?
Yeah, everything's just at All Things Overlanding.
Okay. That makes it easy. Yeah. So make sure you check him out. Again, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Sure.
And I guess I will talk to you soon, man.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Take care.
You too.